Good afternoon, everyone. It's noon, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Lori Flanagan, and I'm the president of Great River Human Resources Association. Thank you for joining us today for our first Ignite HR Roundtable event, hosted by one of our valued platinum partners, St. Ambrose University. Great River's Ignite HR Roundtable events are intended to provide our members the opportunity to hear expert advice from our partners and engage in discussions on recent trends in the human resources profession. I'll let our leaders of the session introduce themselves and take it away.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Lukey. I'm the founder and principal consultant for Highlight HR Consulting, a human resources consulting firm. I'm joined by Dr. Jen Palar. Anything else you want to say?
I know a lot of you, but I am an assistant professor in the management department in the College of Business at St. Ambrose.
Great. So we're very happy to be with all of you today. Thanks for joining us. All right. Could I just get a quick head nod? You can see my screen. Somebody, yep. Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so the first part of our conversation today, I will be talking and then Jen will join me in just a little bit. So just a quick note on, gosh, this amazing journey that we've all been together as HR professionals and as strategic business partners to our business in the space of remote and hybrid and now transitioning back to the workforce. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that today. It's just been such a turbulent ride for all of us. And so I'm hoping to be able to give you some ideas to help continue to be a leader and a strategic partner to your business as we go through some of these phases when it comes to remote, hybrid, and transitioning workplace. So I think it's an important reminder, this quote here by Greg Mortensen, is to slow down and make building relationships as important as building projects. You and I and our colleagues across the world as HR professionals are so busy collaborating with our business leaders on getting stuff done. So bigger, faster, smarter, more important, more impactful projects that are going on in all of our respective organizations. And so I think it's really important for us as HR leaders to help our fellow leaders in our businesses, in our organizations, to slow down and realize that building those relationships, no matter what phase we are in, is as important as getting stuff done. And I don't have to tell you that, of course, that's a great way to get stuff done, is to have those really effective relationships. So let's just do a quick level set here for a second. These are my own little definitions here on remote work. So that means producing results at a location that's other than the office space. And for a lot of people, that's at home. For other people, it might be the local coffee shop or even a shared space with other people. And then, as you're well aware, hybrid work then is some of our employees are working in a remote location other than the office. Some are producing results in the office. So some of each in a hybrid world. And then, of course, it's important for all of us to make sure that we understand the policies and processes. No doubt we've all gone through a huge transition in the last year and a half where we may have had a telework policy, we may not have, we may have had processes or not, but by gosh, we've all figured that out by now. And so I think it's important to just continue as HR professionals for all of us to make sure that we understand the policy, how it's changed, the processes themselves, and of course, providing our expertise and our influence as much as possible in those spaces with policy and the processes. So I think it's a really great space, again, just a reminder for us as HR leaders, as HR professionals, to make sure that we're holding our managers accountable for being A-game managers. And so this is my list of top 10 that we want to make sure that we keep in front of our managers and keep reminding them and supporting them as they're all hopefully aspiring to be A-game managers. So the first one is, of course, to be present. We want our managers to be present, whether it's virtually or in person, making sure that they're making time for their teams and for their direct reports. Also, gosh, we talk so much in the HR world and beyond the HR world about feedback. And so it's important to remind our managers that really never has it been an even more important time, whether we are remote or hybrid or together, to give feedback, constructive feedback, even recognition, positive feedback to our employees or direct reports, but then also to be a leader, show some humility and some vulnerability and request feedback as well, so that we can continue as managers, as leaders, to be even better. I always like to remind managers I work with to lead with compassion. And as you're well aware in your area of expertise, there's always lots of opportunities to lead more with compassion. And sometimes we have leaders in our organizations who get all hot and bothered about something specific, something not getting done fast enough, etc. And so I think there's an opportunity often for us to be that voice of reason and to remind our leaders that it's a place to come from is compassion, and that will serve them well in getting more done faster in the long run. Also, I think it's important to remind our leaders to continue to build those relationships. So again, when we think about hybrid, we think about remote, we even think about people coming back into the office, we can't kind of slack up on this space. We really need our leaders to continue to build those relationships and keep them as professional as possible, so that we can, again, continue to have employees and teams that produce impactful results. I think it's also important to remind our managers to set and revisit clear priorities. I mean, gosh, we've all gone through so many changes in the last year and a half, simply with the pandemic, let alone some of us work for organizations that have been merged or acquired, or we've had bosses change, or we've had direct reports change, or a whole myriad of things that have impacted all of us. And so it's important to not only set those priorities, but to revisit and clarify those priorities. Same thing with the goals. I would just say ditto to what I just said on the goals as well, making sure that our teams know where we're going and why we're going there and what we need to accomplish. I talked a little bit about the recognition earlier, but it's important. We want to make sure our managers understand and appreciate that it's actually a really important part of their job to continue to evaluate, reward, and even course correct with their employees and the results. Certainly, it's a good reminder to always be challenging our leaders to communicate with honesty and transparency, and that would include admitting here are some things that I can't talk about right now, or I won't be able to share with you until a week from now or a month from now, or what we all endured during the pandemic, which is a whole bunch of us saying, I just don't know. And there's maybe a little bit of a comfort in being kind of in the same boat together, even when it comes to a pandemic. We want to remind our managers that it's always a good time to make data-informed decisions. So not data-only decisions, but data-informed decisions. And then we've all been challenged so much to learn and leverage technologies and systems to support us, again, whether our team's in person, co-located with us, or a hybrid, some here, some there, or in many cases, a lot of people working 100% remotely. So let's talk a little bit about the advantages of remote work. And you can use this as a pop quiz. Maybe I haven't thought of everything that you've thought of. So when we think about advantages of remote work when it comes to employees, that gives a lot of people who are very self-driven and self-motivated an opportunity to focus on their goals, their detailed work, their planning, and really giving them a lot of good think time that they may not have had with some of the distractions that came up in the work environment. For many people, it's quiet. For some people, it's not quieter, but for many people, it's quieter. They can actually close the door. They can be alone in a room, and they can, again, do a lot of that think time that so many people often lack in the workplace. A lot of people were able to swap some work time for commute time, or maybe they even inserted some healthier habits for themselves in place of that commute time, such as a morning workout or an afternoon workout. Certainly, we hopefully all saved a little bit of money on gas, where it eliminated some commute cost for many people. And really, people could set up their ideal workspace. So I know as HR professionals, so many of you are the recipients of my chair is too tall, my chair is too small, my chair is all of those complaints that can come with those ergonomic things, or the wrong radio station, or the wrong music, or whatever, good times in HR, of course. And so they can certainly set up their workspace so that it works perfectly for them in theory. On the employer side, then, it really can free up a shared workspace on site. So we saw many organizations in big cities and even small cities that were finding themselves saving money on leased or actual owned workspace. It also can eliminate or reduce relocation costs. We saw a whole lot of companies who were much more flexible when it came to requiring employees, new employees, to relocate to wherever their locations were. And so that can really, as you're well aware, can save a lot of money for an organization by not having to pay relocation costs. And then certainly travel costs as well. So many of us, many of our leaders were used to having very heavy travel schedules. And because of the pandemic, again, it reduced the travel costs as well. But of course, now that we've figured out how to be hopefully even more savvy with remote working, perhaps those savings will continue in some of these spaces that I just mentioned, whether continued remote work or a hybrid opportunity. And of course, there are challenges as well. And so we know that people who work offsite for a long time, or even a short time in some cases, they can be left feeling out of sync. They feel isolated. They're worried about the FaceTime that they might be missing on, some of that FOMO. There might be some proximity bias. So our leaders might be really focused on the people they can see or talk to on a regular basis, but not so much on people who are out of sight and out of mind. And I imagine, because I know that you are all very hardworking HR professionals, sometimes the workday never ends. And so it really takes a lot of initiative on all of our parts, not only us, but our managers, our leaders, our employees, the teams, to declare, okay, the workday is over. I'm going to shut the laptop and get on with my personal life. And then there's the question about, do we have a culture of shared feelings? And so I imagine that all of you in your roles, and like I have over the last year and a half, we've talked about a huge hesitancy in sharing feelings. I know a lot of us were scared to petrified when it came to the pandemic. We had so many unknowns with, of course, our own health, people we love and their health, and then not to mention the organizations for whom we work. And so, you know, there's a wide spectrum, of course, on sharing feelings and certainly talking about the mental health thereof. Lots of people talked about burnout. It's funny, I remember talking to a couple of my colleagues last summer, and we were on a meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and said, gosh, you know, we're just tired already. It's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but we're just feeling burned out. And it could be because of some of the earlier bullets that I have on my slide. Certainly, we've all dealt with slow or intermittent outages with the internet. That can be really frustrating. And then, of course, with COVID-19, I don't have to tell you, so many of our employees had major issues when it came to childcare or educating their children with the schools being closed. And then, as I mentioned earlier, everybody around the world was on some form of concern when it came to health issues, whether it was mental, physical, or feeling shock. So this is the question, right? That if all of us chipped in the money that we earned $1 for every time a manager came and asked us this question, how do I know they're working when they're remote? I mean, we would all just retire and we wouldn't need to have a GHRA anymore. So I would love to hear what you answer this question with. But for me, I've been asked this question for so long because I personally have worked remotely since I think it's 1995, first starting with floppy disks and then a dial-up of all things. And so how do I know they're working when they're remote? And my question back to them is, how do you know they're working when they're at work? And so I think it's a good reminder, again, for all of us, whether we have remote, we have hybrid, we have co-located employees, to reinforce for managers where we really need them to spend their time, which is not sitting around pondering if their employees are working when they're remote, because they probably didn't spend a lot of time wondering that when they were in the office. So they see them on the phone, they see them staring at their computer screen, but maybe they're talking to their mom and they're shopping for Christmas. We don't know, right? And so I think it's a great opportunity for us as HR professionals to continue to remind our managers and our employees that we need to start with a level of trust. So a little bit on the tough love though. So when it comes to remote employees, let's all just agree that not every job or every employee is good for a remote working situation. Of course, it was thrust upon us with the pandemic, but certainly now there's an opportunity for us to regroup and refresh and really be able to support our managers who come to us who say, well, you know, Jen's a great performer, Jen does a really good job, and I'm totally fine and comfortable and trusting with her working remotely. But Michelle, not so much, I've got some concerns. But you and I all know that that has nothing to do with so much the remote work as it does with perhaps the person in my example, or even so many jobs are not ones that can be done remotely. I do remind managers on the regular that it is a privilege, it's not an entitlement. And sometimes that's a tricky, challenging conversation with our employees, but certainly I'm confident that you as HR professionals can support your leaders with that conversation. And then, you know, the silver bullet really, which is to remind our managers that they really need to manage, or they really need to evaluate people based on what they produce and how they produce it and the quality thereof. And therein lies as I said, the silver bullet. And so many managers they get a little nervous about that, but really, I hope you would agree that as a manager, it's not optional, that's your job. And so it's no different whether they're working remotely or hybrid or co-located. We really need our managers to continue to evaluate people based on what and how they produce. So let's talk a little bit more about communication, because communication, I don't have to tell you, is so important when it comes to all of our employee situations, again, regardless of where they're working. So I think when it comes to, no doubt, when you have employees who are working remotely, especially, explicit and amped up communication is really in order. And hopefully you've been able to see your managers step up to that challenge. And hopefully we as HR professionals have been able to step up to that challenge, especially over the last year and a half. No doubt, none of us has gotten it perfect, but hopefully the amped up piece is something that we all kept in front of us just to try and be communicative as possible with our organizations. So this is just table stakes, making sure that, just a reminder to have those meeting agendas in advance, have a facilitator if it's a big deal, and even a note taker if possible. Another one I love, and we've been hearing a lot more about this over the last year and a half, is to agree on core hours and no meeting times. So I've worked with a lot of organizations and even departments where they declare we're only going to make sure that we have meetings between, I'm going to make this up, 10 and 2 Central Time, or we're not going to have any meetings on Friday or Friday afternoon, or managers who even declare no emails and no meetings after 4 o'clock or something like that. And so perhaps in the spirit of mental health, physical health, and of course, wherever people are working, perhaps this is a place to refresh. I think it's another important time, as I mentioned early on, to outline and review expectations on the part of our leaders. Maybe it's time to dust off and clarify those decision rights and processes. I don't know about you, but some of the organizations I've worked with over the last year and a half, we got a little bit tangled up sometimes when it came to those decision rights, because we were so used to being able to get into a room, or we were so used to our standing meetings where we had standard processes. And of course, the pandemic kind of screwed with that a little bit. And so perhaps this is another time to refresh on that space. I think this year and a half, perhaps you'll agree, has also taught us that it's really important as much as possible to kind of have everybody on the same platform. And so what I mean is have everyone participate virtually so that we don't get into the problem of those side conversations or the paper rustling or someone's internet goes down and everyone else is carrying on without them. And so I think having people on the same level playing field can be helpful. I also think it's helpful to just agree, are we going to do video or not? You know, people joke about being video camera ready or not. And of course, it's just polite to let people know if we're going to record or not. And then, as I'm sure you're aware, in many countries, especially the European countries, it's required to let people know it's recorded. So a little bit more on the connection piece. And so I have this title, to connect people and create community. So here are some ideas that probably a lot of them you've already thought of. I'll just keep them in front of you as refreshers. And so how can we continue to build those relationships, sitting and doing their work? And so hopefully many of you have already tried the 30-minute kind of a drop-in virtual lunch. No talking about work, can only talk about junk TV as an example. You can set up 15-minute tea time, coffee time dates with people just to check in, back to building those relationships and continuing to amp up the communication. I participated in a virtual happy hour. Everyone brings their own drink, of course, at their desk at home or wherever they are, and they participate in, again, just a fun kind of build relationship, get to know you kind of thing. Also, we've seen some virtual wedding showers, baby showers. So those celebratory things, retirements, keeping those in front of us can be a great way to keep people connected as well. I don't know if you've tried this yet. I started this concept several years ago. We're stressed out. And so we were brainstorming as a team on how could we do even better when it came to our mental health, our physical health, and reducing our stress. And so we really did incorporate quite a few walking meetings. They don't work for everything. They don't work in the Iowa weather. And if you're concerned about your hair at all, they really don't work. But anyway, there are a few good days, and walking meetings can be really helpful. You can meet in a park, that's outside as well. Obviously more of a concern when we were especially concerned about the pandemic. And then reminding our managers and our leaders and even our own leaders in HR that there's nothing quite like a face-to-face conversation. So reminding people to really try to prioritize money in that travel budget. And then of course, it's always a great idea not to be frivolous, but to have a sprinkle of fun and humanity in our meetings. So it might be an icebreaker at the beginning of the meeting, just to keep people talking, let everyone kind of pitch an idea on whatever their favorite, whatever book or ice cream or whatever, just to keep people, again, connected and building that community. So I don't know if you attended this recent Gartner webinar. I thought there were some interesting things for us as HR professionals to pay attention to. And so we've heard, a lot of kind of sexy news articles and news reports about some companies who are planning to be just fully remote. And it seems like we get those announcements on the daily basis. But really, according to this, only 1% of mid-sized companies anyway were planning to be fully remote. And then 5% were having everybody come back to the physical workspace. And so the remaining 94% will have a mix. So in office, remote, and hybrid employees. And then 69% of mid-sized companies are planning on reopening their workplaces in the second half of 2021. So it would be curious for all of us to kind of weigh in on what our organizations are planning to do, if they've already come back or they're phasing back or whatever. And I've certainly heard a whole variety of plans in that space. So let's talk a little bit about workplace transition. So many of us have had the opportunity to actually do hiring in 2020 and 2021. And, God bless all those new employees who have started online and remotely with us. And so I think it's an important reminder then to, again, back to the communication thing, is to communicate early what our plans are in the transition space. And so as I imagine many of you
I believe they might be having a Wi-Fi issue. I'm going to have them come down to my office to finish the presentation. Give us just a moment. Sorry about that.
Great, thanks, Megan. While Megan is grabbing Michelle and Jen, there were a couple of points that Michelle had talked about that I thought would be interesting for us to discuss and learn from each other. She was talking about ways of connecting people and creating community. as you are starting to bring your employees back, I'd love to hear from anyone that would be willing to share. What are some of the strategies or the tools that you're using to get people back and to reconnect with each other?
Leanne, I'll share. We are just bringing back our teams this week, actually. So for Molyneux and Assured Partners, we've had remote work for the past 15 months, and we're doing an A and B team back, started yesterday, and we're trying to do some food trucks on site later, maybe later July, and then it's gonna be every Friday we're doing some form of happy hour and snacks on that Friday afternoon to try to catch both teams that are coming in. And then as management, we're trying our best to be on site during that. So just trying to get the community back, which I know we've all desperately missed.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. Those are great ideas. Food trucks, instantly, I was like, that is an awesome idea. What a great way to get people excited. Who doesn't love a food truck?
Oh, we've missed all this fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else?
Yeah, Chris, excuse me, this is Rhonda. Thanks for sharing that. In fact, we just talked about that this morning in our meeting that we had, talking about our return to work. So I'm with Stanley Consultants in Muscatine. We're going to be coming back in September. We are going to it either a hybrid, like we were just talking to, if individuals want. We won't have a fully remote, but we will have a hybrid option. They're still working through what that would look like. Sounds like it's going to be more kind of like a hoteling space for individuals. But we were just talking about this morning is, okay, how do we welcome individuals back? Right now we have a kind of a welcome packet for those that have been in the office previously, which was, some Stanley Fun items, a water bottle, a t-shirt, those type of things. And that was just for just the select few that were allowed to come back into the office. So, we've done that, but we haven't done anything on a bigger scale through all of our locations. So I love the food truck idea, Chris. Sure, in regards to the budget, if that would be working in all of our multiple locations, but that's a great idea. So yeah, anybody else that's got ideas to share, I'd love to hear them too, because again, that just
Can you make me a co-host so I can share the screen from here, and then we'll be ready to go? Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. All right, great discussion, and we can certainly pick that back up here. I'll make Megan a co-host. Megan, you should be all set.
All righty. Thanks, guys. Thanks for bearing with us.
Screen, yes.
They can see, yeah.
Okay, we're back in action. And how ironic, because I was just talking about communication. So of course it went dead.
Yeah, and then super little.
Thank you. Okay, as I was saying, it's really important to communicate early and include safety measures when you're talking with your employees, making sure whatever your organization has figured out they want to do. So maybe there are increased cleaning protocol that's going on. Maybe there are some mask requests that they have of employees. Maybe there are things like social distancing, not sharing, shared space, those kinds of things. So just making sure that that's important and clearly communicated for everybody. I think it's also important to define and communicate whatever your hybrid approach is. And so again, back to kind of our earlier conversation about dusting off some of those telework rules and policies and processes, and making sure that everybody understands kind of what the rules of the road are, especially as we've all now come through this pandemic and so many people have been very effective at working remotely. It's also important to regularly reinforce your safety measures. Whatever the safety measures are for your organization, it's important to continue to reinforce those. So we want our employees, if they're coming back and working in our offices, our factories, our facilities, to make sure that they're feeling comfortable and they have confidence that we as an organization, we as the company, have really taken their health and their safety to heart when it comes to the pandemic and making sure that they stay safe. Certainly, I don't have to tell you, but you may often find yourselves having to tell your leaders and your managers that we as organizations can encourage vaccinations, all vaccinations, including, of course, COVID, but it's not something that we really want to require. And it's also something that we need to acknowledge that it's a personal decision. And so we really want to keep our employees from, as we do with any other kind of conversation at shared workspaces, is really making sure that we're not challenging each other on whatever the personal decision is, making sure that our employees feel comfortable. So just a friendly reminder for all of us as HR professionals, we want to continue to be really informed and stay on top of, and hopefully adding a lot of great input to whatever our company approach and our timeline is, and making sure that we're good advocates for what our transition approach is and make sure we're supporting it. We also want to continue, as I mentioned, I had a few ideas for you earlier, reminders probably for many of you, is to continue to create community. We have been apart for a very long time. So many people have been apart for a very long time. And when it comes to our new employees I was talking about before we got disconnected, gosh, they really need a lot of our support and making sure that they know that they've joined a community and that we are going to help them get up to speed when it comes to knowing not only where the restroom is and the cafeteria or those kinds of things, but also making sure that we're creating community and helping them get adjusted and knowing the important stakeholders in their work lives. Also want to make sure that we're contributing to attending to whatever technology and facilities resources we want to make sure we have in our organizations, and make sure they continue to be not only professional and supportive of all of our work and creating high impact results for the company, but then also, again, making sure people feel that they're comfortable and they're not worried about contracting COVID or anything else at work. It's important to organize those informal gatherings. I know that some of our leaders, some of our managers, and some of us as HR professionals don't love the party planning role, but it really is important as we come back together, get reacclimated, especially again for those new people who have never been with us physically, to help organize some informal gatherings to help people get to know each other. And then specific to new employees themselves, just some reminders. I know that you know all this, but again, we're all a little bit rusty on some of these social kind of protocols for our organizations. It's important to make sure people get introduced. We really want our managers to check in frequently and be responsive to any kind of questions that our new employees might have. The idea of setting up mentors and buddies, those are things that we've all done for probably a long time. This is a good time to refresh that practice and make sure people are feeling comfortable and familiar as they're coming into our organization, many for the first time. Certainly tours of the facility or the factory, discussing those important performance goals and metrics and expectations. And then we know so many of our new employees who are joining us for the first time and who have over the last year and a half want to continue to have a great career. And hopefully it's for the duration with your organization. But we know that that's a really important topic for employees, not the least of which are our new employees. And then back to the feedback drum, I always have to beat that one, which is making sure that we're giving regular feedback to our employees, especially the new ones, and then asking for feedback. How are things going? What can I do more of? What can I do less of to be even more effective and supportive of you as a new employee? And this is my last slide before I turn it over to Jen. So just a reminder that it's important to build the right relationships with the right people and nurture them over time so that you'll always have a leg up on competition. And that's certainly what so many of us are focused on for our organizations as an important supporting function in HR and continuing to support and collaborate with our leaders. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen.
So instead of passing the baton, Michelle and I are passing the rolling chair from one person to another. So before I get started with a few things, I know you were able to have a little bit of discussion as we were transitioning to a different internet connected device, but I do want to create some space for questions based on any of the things that Michelle mentioned. I do have a lot of information in my slides, but I purposely put a lot of information in case there was a lot of discussion. So then people could just reference slides if need be. So anything on, work-based management, especially the question of how do we know people are working? Well, how do we manage people based on their work product? Or how do we convince business leaders we should do this or we shouldn't do this? We shouldn't have alternate working arrangements or we should. Anything like that before we transition over. No questions? That's okay. I can skip over to. So some of the strategic implications of alternative working arrangements, and I'll call them AWAs, I might say remote work, I might say hybrid work, they all mean the exact same thing. These are really business level decisions for an organization to make. And one of the most important things that HR is contributing to these discussions are, what does our workforce look like? What type of jobs do we have? What type of tasks do these jobs perform? Because that's very important information for organizational leaders to have when they're making these types of decisions. So a couple things to consider. What really are a company's objectives? What is it that we are ultimately trying to achieve? Does having some type of alternate work arrangement help us in achievement of that objective? And the next is really what objectives are most critical? While there might be a lot of things that we want to accomplish as an organization, what are those things that really are at the top that's most important for us moving forward? As we can't focus on everything all at one time, we have to pick out those couple of things that are going to be most critical to us. What are the possible outcomes of the HR initiatives that we are proposing? Making sure that we understand what those outcomes look like, and then being able to tie back in the lower right-hand corner here, how those outcomes actually support, or outcomes initiatives, how those support what our organization is trying to achieve. So the way we take these 4 questions sort of in a research phase before we're talking with organizational leaders can help us frame the discussion as to whether or not certain things are going to be beneficial for us. I'm going to give an example of an organization that I talked with recently, and one of their most critical objectives was business continuity. This was a healthcare organization. So obviously being open, being able to treat individuals was the most critical thing that they were trying to focus on at the time. And they were having a whole bunch of issues and they couldn't quite figure out why are we having all these problems with our employees. And so I have listed on here, obviously you have to have people present if you're going to have adequate healthcare. You have to have people who are there for attendance. And so this company had, through this whole process, instituted a very strict attendance policy because we want to obviously reduce absenteeism. We need people to be present in the workplace. So they had a progressive disciplinary policy that they enhanced in order to keep their business going. However, for their particular workforce, a lot of women provide patient care. Healthcare is very female dominated in some cases. A lot of single mothers are the ones who provide direct patient care, those who are interacting with them all the time. So strict attendance policies penalize absences. Single mothers have more absences due to childcare responsibilities. More absences equals more discipline. More discipline equals more turnover. More turnover means we don't have business continuity. So the decision that this organization made in instituting this more rigorous progressive attendance policy actually worked in opposite to the objective that they were trying to achieve, because they weren't specifically looking at their exact workforce. Every workforce is going to be different. So while a policy like this may have worked for another company, in this case, the type of employees that they have, it just wasn't actually going to support their objectives. It was working against what they wanted to do. So in order for us to limit that, there's a couple things that tend to come up. And one of them is describing our workforce the way we wish it was. Well, we wish employees didn't have to find alternate care for their children, or we wish employees were more available during particular hours. Looking at the actual nitty-gritty of what does our workforce look like is going to lead to better decision outcomes for us. So another one. So assuming our workforce is different from other companies, I regularly talk with organizations that, yeah, that's happened at a lot of other companies, but our employees definitely wouldn't do that. And in actuality, people are very, very similar. And so taking that assumption that somehow our workforce is completely different and wouldn't fall into any type of trend or things like that related to other organizations, that can be one of the pitfalls in the decision process. And then the next one is really telling employees what they should want, or assuming that we know what it is that they want. And the example that I have here is about autonomy. And so many people feel that autonomy, not being micromanaged, having the freedom to choose when and how and where you work, is a very motivating factor in their job. And they appreciate it when someone gives them autonomy. So they want to offer others autonomy and being able to do that. However, we're finding with Gen Z employees and younger that autonomy is not actually a big motivator. Autonomy is very scary. And so it's not motivating to Gen Z employees who are starting to enter the workforce, and those even younger, those teenagers and undergraduate students and things like that. What's more motivating are thorough details and instructions and supervisory support. So access to my supervisor and things like that. So as opposed to that autonomy freedom, here you go, do what you need to do. I'll check in every now and again, not necessarily as motivating for that particular group. So even though we think employees should want autonomy, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what our specific workforce or this particular group is actually looking for. So recognizing these things is very important as we're participating in some of these higher level decision processes. So I know that some of you have heard about what is dubbed the Great Resignation. So instead of the Great Recession, we're looking at the Great Resignation. And there seems to be study after study, survey after survey that tells us people are going to be leaving companies and moving somewhere else. And there's a whole host of reasons for that, whether there's more jobs that are available now than there were in the past. For some reason, they're disenfranchised or disillusioned about their organization. They know they want to do something different. They've realized they want to make some changes, maybe even safety concerns or other things like that, opportunities that weren't available to them before in terms of moving and those types of things. So we've seen a lot of this Great Resignation information, and Sherm shared a lot about it. A few others have talked about it as well. And so these alternate work arrangements, we can say as a form to attract and retain employees. So if that's one of our objectives, something that we can see. And I've talked with a lot of organizations about, we had this, now we don't want to have it. And our employees aren't buying the fact that it won't work for us anymore. They need some type of other information related to that. So how is it that we tell them we no longer want to offer this, or the reasons why we're going to continue it when some employees may even want to come back as a sense of normalcy or things like that. So why is it that we would want it or we would not want it? And Michelle touched on a couple of these reasons. So it might be inconvenient for the organization. We don't want to offer this anymore because truly it's inconvenient. Trying to figure out where everyone's located, trying to manage people remotely can be very, very challenging, especially for those who aren't used to it. It's much more convenient. We can see everyone in the same place. Is it that we don't actually trust our employees? Maybe we don't want to offer remote work anymore or other type of alternate working arrangements because we don't think they're actually going to do what they should. We have a hard time letting go for that. Or it could be that our managers actually don't have the competencies to successfully manage people. So again, that work-based management is a different skill set. It requires different competencies in many cases than just being able to see someone face-to-face and sort of the manage by walking around or manage by, I see someone in their office, so I know that they're here actually doing something, a different level of competencies. So one of the things that we can do is help to answer why is it that we do or don't want to continue offering this in the future. So do we know what is our inconvenience versus possible turnover cost related to this? They're predicting that companies will see some form of turnover. Those who already have high turnover, maybe it will be a little bit more, maybe it won't be that much. We don't actually know, but there's good indicators that there's going to be turnover. So which one is going to be more of a driver for us financially? Is it this turnover cost or is it this inconvenience that we might experience? I have a few examples you can look at there. Why does this lack of trust exist? Is it past performance? We have some poor performers that we're really nervous that this is going to, exacerbate their poor performance in some area because they don't have as much check-in. They don't have as much access to their supervisor as they would if they were in a physical space. Is it that in the past this may not have worked, but some of our less than stellar employees actually left? That's where HR can step in. Those people we were worried about. Well, we know that they may not necessarily be here right now, and that's helpful information for senior leaders as they're making this. Or is it really personal preference? People face to face, and that's okay too. And then why is it that some of our managers lack these competencies? Maybe they've never had training on this. They've never had any access to professional development in terms of how to develop these competencies, or maybe they don't know what competencies they lack and what competencies they need. So sometimes it's just a little bit of self-awareness or offering some opportunities for them to be able to develop a little bit further. Maybe there's lack of experience for some people in managing alternative work arrangements. It hasn't been the norm for so long that my guess is there's a substantial amount in terms of lack of experience as to why individuals may not feel as comfortable doing this moving forward. So being able to address those will be helpful. So if we're going to make the recommendation to our organization, if we're hopefully participating in this process with our senior leaders, determining how this is going to help us achieve our organizational objectives. So how does an alternate work arrangement impact our organization? How actually does it do that? Does it support or work against our objectives? In which way? Do our employees want or not want, remote or hybrid work? And then what are those reasons? Understanding the reasons why they want or don't want it would be critical to our decision process. And then finally, what are the consequences of not offering it or continuing to offer it? Again, these could be an either or because it's not a good fit for some organizations and it is a good fit for others. And we're going to see employees on both sides of these things. So our consequences, turnover and absenteeism. Our consequences, actually more people would stay or other things like that. So whichever answers to those questions we can assist with, HR can bring this information to the table to clarify. This is our workforce. This is what we're seeing. And this is going to help us reach a better conclusion about whether or not we should actually do something like this. So then the next few slides, slight bit of math, but it's more or less an example of how we can talk about this using actual numbers to make the business case as to why we should or should not add alternate working arrangements, keep alternate working arrangements, or remove alternate working arrangements. So in this case here, organization, 20% turnover, costs about $5,000 per person, recruiting, training costs, overtime until we replace them, other things like that. 400 employees, that's about $400,000 per year. Any number that's even remotely approaching $500,000 is going to be a substantial amount for an organization. So if goals at this company are recruiting top talent, we need to keep people here and retain them, as well as reducing our overall cost. Two things that we will see at most organizations. We also have information. Data suggests there is going to be this wave of individuals changing jobs over the next 6 months, a year, 18 months from now. So based on that, if we do just a tiny bit of math, so if we don't offer it based on our specific workforce and a very modest figure, 3%, we think this might increase our turnover by 3%. Based on the numbers on the last slide, that's about $60,000 in additional cost. Okay, if we do offer it, because we find out this is something that our employees would really, really want, decreasing turnover, again, based on our specific workforce and a very modest figure, decreases turnover by 3%. So sometimes in the math, when we're comparing numbers, we tend to look at just the original amount, the 400,000, and then the savings of about 60. So thinking there's a 60,000 swing. But the important thing that we have to remember is that we're also looking at, we have to base it on that new figure. Not offering is going to increase our turnover. That's a $60,000 swing. Offering it is also a $60,000 swing. So now we're looking at $120,000 in making this particular decision. And so math shows in this case that yes, it would be from a cost perspective, helpful for us to offer something like this. Now, again, this is just a generic example. This is not based on any particular workforce or things like that. It's just sort of a template to highlight how it is that we could walk through this process, how it is we could walk through the math, walk through the discussion, and some of the things that we should potentially consider when we are talking with senior leaders about whether or not we should continue or adopt something. So after this example, I want to stop and again ask for any questions, any comments, any feedback, things that people want to share, maybe experiences that you had with this that others could learn from, or questions that you could either pose to us or the group that we might be able to help you with. And please feel free, you can use the chat function. You can just ask outright.
I'm not going to ask a question, but I'm just going to comment, Jen. It's really good to put the numbers out there because the reality is that's what businesses will be asking. That's what leaders will be asking is how much is this going to cost us, right?
Yes, the math. So anyone else, questions, comments?
Has anyone gotten maybe the ultimatum of their employees stipulating that if I can't work remote, then I'm going to look for another position? You know, I know I've been reading a lot about the return to work is going to cause a lot of turnover. So how has everyone been dealing with, you know, that type of comments that we've been reading? Has anyone dealt with that yet?
So I can offer a little bit about the companies that I've talked with. And it came down to really figuring out why is it that they were making those ultimatums? Were they making those ultimatums because I don't feel comfortable coming back to work because I'm concerned about my health? Is it I don't feel comfortable coming back to work yet because I haven't found a childcare provider? I don't feel comfortable coming back to work because I no longer like it here. And I'm simply hinting at the fact that I don't want to say out loud, but I'm putting you on notice that I actually want to do that. So figuring out the reasons behind the ultimatums can help organizations make better decisions. Because if there's a whole group of employees that do feel the same way, and there's something that the organization can do about it, then it would be helpful to address that. But having that information is critical.
Great. I know that we're going to try to stay on top of it we're putting together our total comp, you know, where we can provide individuals with, you know, maybe if you think you're going somewhere for a couple more bucks an hour, here's what you are, you know, you're letting go. Is it worth it? You know, so putting together our total comp and sending that out to members is one of the things we're trying to stay proactive in talking about the value of working for our company. So appreciate that feedback. Thank you, Megan.
I was going to say, I would wonder if some of the whole turnover piece, because I haven't read a ton on it just yet, but has to do with how things went during the pandemic, you know, like what happened, you know, because everybody was a little unsure and, you know, certainly not all companies made, you know, perfect decisions, but that was certainly a piece of it. One of the things that I ran into, which is to me, it's like a little bit of a different issue. And this was a really young person. This was a person like not too long out of college, liked the job, but wanted to work remote, but didn't want to live near, like wanted to live someplace else. And I thought, okay, not really sure about that because you're going to be missing out on, I mean, it's great that you want to do that. I think the concept is good. And that's what, you know, this is kind of promoting. But when I think about a young person in their career, I think about like, what are you missing by not being in the office at least sometimes, you know, the coaching, the training, the development, the opportunity for promotion. I mean, all those things are missed if you're really going to be absent. You're always going to be slotted into that job, the job that's in some other state or whatever. And I know that those things happen. But I also, my comment to them was, I don't think that that's in general what you're going to see going forward. So.
Well, thanks for those pieces of information and questions. Excellent there. So I'm almost done here. So just a couple takeaways from this. So importance of understanding your workforce. What actually is your specific workforce makeup? And then how does that impact you in decisions? So using that understanding to evaluate your options, not ignoring data that's especially specific and relevant to your organization, to your industry, to the types of jobs that you offer, that can provide a helpful piece. Obviously, not all sectors, all industries, all types of jobs are going to experience the same level of turnover. It would be a mistake for us to assume that that's going to be uniformly spread across size of organization and geographic distribution and other things like that, but recognizing that specific data for you. And when you are making this business case, you'll notice in my math template that I had, I did make some assumptions about how I thought this was going to impact the organization in terms of turnover. It's okay to make some of those assumptions as long as we're grounding it in our workforce. And sometimes we're going to have to do that because we're predicting, we're trying to put numbers to something where we don't have all of the concrete information yet. So as long as our assumptions are grounded in something related to our organization or other information that we have that is credible, it is okay to make some of those assumptions. Evaluate those in the example I gave in terms of the whole process, not just necessarily the outcome of, oh, we want to stop people being absent, so we should penalize absences even more than we have in the past. And then finally, ensuring that our managers definitely have those competencies to be able to manage in-person workforces, to manage alternative work arrangements. That's going to be very important for the success of both types of work arrangements for employees. So I'm not sure if we have any questions, probably not based on the key takeaway slide, we would have too many questions. But for the last piece of what we wanted to talk about, just maybe for another minute or so here, we do have an exciting opportunity for HR folks, because we know that there has been this substantial call on HR over the last 2 years and well beyond that too. If you've been in HR for a while, you know you've been called on for quite a few things over the course of your career. So Michelle and I, in conjunction with the Professional Development Center, have put together some programming to help you also to develop some of the competencies. So it's a 4-course series. We'll have one a month, take them all or together. Things that HR people need right now, the things that both of us get asked all the time, trying to help organizations and others with. So Michelle and I are both super passionate about HR. And so we want to do whatever we can to help elevate the profession as much as possible. So we do have a couple of different ones if you want to learn a little bit more about math. So business acumen, something that all HR professionals can benefit from. Math versus myth. We know there's a lot of that going on there. Coaching, collaborating, consulting, and then also dealing with change. That's been one of the things that in HR, we've always dealt with change, but now it's a little bit different magnitude than we have in the past. And please feel free to reach out to us for any information on that. We do have the link here in our slides, and we can share our slides as well for that. But we're both so excited. We could hardly wait to share that information with everyone. So we hope to see as many people as possible to have more discussions about how can we continue to improve as HR professionals in the area and beyond. But any questions? I know we have just a couple minutes left. And I know that either Leanne or Lori might have a little bit of additional information to share. All right, well, I will turn it back over. And thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Jen and Michelle Lubke, for just leading this impactful discussion and about the challenges facing our organizational leaders today and ways in which HR can position their organization for success. And thank you to St. Ambrose for being Great Rivers Platinum Partner this year and in the past. We really appreciate all your support. To our valued members, thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us over your lunch hour. And know that we have some other good upcoming events. Our next one will be July 13th at 10 a.m. Please come and participate in a discussion with Andy Sokolovich. He's the Vice President of Economic Development in Clinton Regional Development Corporation. During this session, he will discuss and share more information about student loan repayment programs and how the Clinton region has leveraged this emerging benefit. to attract and retain talent to the Clinton region. In addition, at July's meeting, we will actually serve as a fundraiser for the SHRM Foundation. And if there has been no other year that you have realized what the SHRM Foundation does, it is all the research that they did with the pandemic. I felt like there was always new information as we needed it, and they came through with flying colors. Well, the SHRM Foundation, this is just one of the things that they do. So we'll have a representative at our next meeting who will talk a little bit about more of the ways the foundation leaves some positive social change and impacting work. So we know that your time is valuable. We appreciate you choosing to spend your time with us today. We hope to see you at our next event. Until then, stay healthy and safe.